Hello and welcome to my channel. I'm Yal and today I'm going to show you how I painted this beautiful green hummingbird. The reference image I used is from Pixabay, and for some reason I changed the color of the wings. Here are the different green combinations with salt and I chose this one. So after applying a glaze of water, I'm applying not so diluted lemon yellow, followed by same consistency of sap green and then hocus green to make a beautiful transition from cool yellow to warm greens to cool greens. The reason I used a thicker consistency of paint in the very first layer is because I'm going to apply the salt technique. As soon as I laid down the paint, I took a pinch of salt and spread it over the painted area. You do not need a lot of salt, a little bit goes a long way. Now to enhance the salt effect, I took a small amount of clean water on my brush and dropped it in several places. For this painting, I chose Cotman watercolors. However, while the first layer is still drying, I'm preparing sepia from my professional watercolor set because I feel that Cotman sepia leans too much towards brown. For the beak, I'm using a very diluted Payne's grey from Cotman and the same diluted Payne's grey as a base layer for the eyes. The consistency of paint I'm using here is tea-like consistency, so very diluted. And I did not apply any glaze of water before applying paint. The paper is dry and the technique is called wet on dry. The brush size I'm using is a size 2 round brush, and notice that I left a small area with the white paper showing through. Now let's allow the first layer on the eyes to dry and move on to the beak. Here I'm using a thicker consistency of sepia for the lower beak. Now I'm taking a small amount of same consistency of sepia to the upper beak as well. Now that the first layer on the eyes is completely dry, I'm using the size 2 round brush and a milk-like consistency of sepia to enhance the darkness of the eyes. Then I switch to a 000 round brush, and with the same thicker consistency of sepia, I'm painting the details around the eyes. Then with the same 000 round brush and a cream-like consistency of sepia, I am darkening the areas inside the eyes and creating some very fine details like reflections of surroundings in the eyes, but always remembering to preserve that small white area, which helps to make the eyes look realistic. Using the same fine brush and a thicker consistency of sepia, I'm enhancing the separation between the upper and the lower beak. I'm using a very diluted tea-like consistency of sepia as a second layer and suggesting some feather textures. To suggest some feathers, you can use the short flicking motion. And now I'm using a diluted sepia to create some shadow areas under the eyes. And softening the edges with a slightly damp brush. Now in this layer you'll see that everything comes together. Once the first layer on the head is completely dry, I'm using a milk-like consistency of sepia and short flicking motions to suggest some feathers by creating texture. And you can always soften the edges by using a slightly damp brush. Now let's move on to suggest some wing feathers by using the negative painting technique. It is a very popular technique where you paint something by painting around it. So first I lay down a small amount of sap green, milk-like consistency, and after cleaning my brush and using this slightly damp brush, I soften the edges. With the same paint consistency and a very thin brush, I'm making some upward strokes. Now for these other wing feathers, I'm using a milk-like consistency of sepia and round brush size 2. I lay down the paint I'm working on dry paper here. Then I clean my brush and remove the excess water on a paper towel and use this slightly damp brush to soften the edges. And I'm doing the same thing over here. I felt like the head area needed some more feather textures. So now I'm taking a very fine brush with the thicker consistency of sepia and using the flicking motion, I'm adding some more of the feather details. For the branch, I used a very diluted Payne's grey to recycle the same paint that I used on the bird's eye and the beak. First I put down a glaze of water. I placed the paint only on the edges so that it would bleed into the moist area. And then once again dropped in some sepia to echo the paints used on the bird. Then I applied some more of sepia and then softened the edges with a damp brush in order to create some shadow in this area under the wings. Now as a final touch, I once again took out some more sepia, a thicker consistency, to reinforce the feather details on the head area and around the eye. Finally, I'm going to use a small amount of white gouache, slightly diluted, and a very thin brush to create some white feather details. But this step is totally optional. So we are almost done. Remember, every painting teaches you something new, and every brushstroke is part of your journey. Please don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already. I will see you soon with a new tutorial.